We welcome you. Today's webinar is a topic that was suggested by attendees like yourselves who have asked a number of times to do something on Longline operations. We have brought together a pretty good panel of people to discuss training and some of the actual operations involving Longline, so we can try and give you a good idea of what goes on below the helicopter when you're flying the load. To start, I'd like to do some of our introductions. Today, Jim Viola, our president and CEO of HAI, will introduce the event. We also have Kim and Andre Hutchings from Vola Mission. Kim is the president and CEO, also does quite a bit of instructing, and also does writing for some magazines. And Andre is the chief pilot for Vola Mission. We have Cody Barton, who is chief pilot for Columbia Helicopters. He's out on forest fires right now out west, and so we're hoping that we won't lose him to Call of Duty. And we have Sammy Chalberg, who is a firefighting pilot for Helicopter Express. She also was a recent Whirly Girl Scholarship winner for the Longline course.
Okay.
During the webinar, we encourage you to ask questions. On the right side of your screen, there should be a module from GoToWebinar. One of the module buttons will allow you to ask questions. You will submit them in writing, and we will try to answer all the questions at the end of the webinar after we've had the presentations. Tomorrow, usually about 24 hours after the webinar is over, there should be a video link available. So if you do miss something, or if you want to share it, or if you want to see something you might have missed, you should be able to catch the webinar on video tomorrow. I'd now like to introduce James Viola, our president and CEO of HAI.
Thanks, Dan. And once again, thanks for putting together a great bunch of people today to talk about an interesting topic, Longline. I do have to start today with the condolences to the family. We did lose a helicopter fighting firefighters out west here in the United States yesterday. And I know that's it's a very sad time for those that are working so hard out there. So my condolences go out on that. Most helicopter operators are out now doing long hours, and just as you said there with some of our presentators today, that we appreciate them coming on here. It's a requested topic, and it again shows the utility of the vertical flight aircraft, particularly in this case, the different types of helicopters and long line operations. And just like you started off with the survey there, I've done some sling loads, but I certainly haven't done long lives, and I'm very interested in today's topic. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Dan, and let's get this information out to our members here at HAI.
Thanks, Jim. I do appreciate it. So I would like to invite Andre and Kim Hutchings to bring your cameras up. And there we go. Kim, perhaps you can start out by talking a little bit about what Vola Mission is and how you guys formed, why you guys formed Vola Mission there in Campbell, Texas.
So Vola Mission is a longline training company. That's all that we do. We specialize exclusively in longline vertical reference. It was created by Andre as far as the course itself. And he can talk a little bit about that as to why he wanted to formally start that. We've evolved the course to include a lot more than just the training side of things as far as the helicopter and flying the line. We've involved more of the human factor side of things. That's my background, so we've brought those two together to create a comprehensive training course.
So I've worked for Columbia Helicopters for the last 25 years, seen a lot of incredible work done by a lot of amazing pilots in that company. So we put together this course. It was really no formal training. It was kind of the old school way of doing it. So the way I learned, the way Cody learned was there's a 500, they gave us the 500 pilots before us gave us some training, and then we kind of went from there and we graduated through the process at Columbia. There wasn't any really formal training companies, one in the 70s out in California, but so we decided to put something together based off all the experiences and exercises and that type of thing, and to give people the ability to start at the very basics, a lot of good tips and pointers. It's We cover ground school, ground training, rigging. Start with vertical reference, which is the foundation for Longline. You've got to be able to learn how to hang out that aircraft door or out that bubble, looking aft and down. And that's, you're taking your horizon away. So it adds a whole new dimension to your flying. So vertical reference is the first thing. And we've got several different courses there. Go through, like I say, the ground classes and basics of long lining, into intermediate, complex type of loads, advanced loads, construction, confined areas, firefighting, all that type of stuff. So pretty comprehensive.
Okay, well, let's start out. Let me bring up a slide. Let's talk about vertical reference. What is vertical reference as opposed to flying a helicopter?
Yeah, so vertical reference is pretty much looking out and down. So as helicopter pilots, we all sit up. We have, we've got the reference in front of us. We can see the nose moving based off the horizon, all that type of thing. We make control inputs just naturally after a while, right? When you're out the door or out the bubble looking straight down, you've lost that horizon, you've lost those references. So all of a sudden you've got this very small area that you're looking into. So you'll find that when you first start learning that the nose can completely go, you can do a 90-degree, 180-degree turn and you don't even know the aircraft's turn, just the wind being on one side of the aircraft as opposed to the other. So vertical reference, it allows you to, you've got the pictures there, that's how you would start. Those were kind of Alaskan style heliports that we used to land at with Columbia. And then we've built some heliports there. And that just reinforces your ability to be able to look down and control the aircraft looking out and down, which is very important. So that should be the first step. That's a foundation for hooking that line underneath the aircraft then, and then start and flying the whole time, looking out and down. So that's the way we introduce you to that concept and that style of flying.
Well, and what kind of aircraft are you operating there with Vola mission?
So we operate the R-44 for Vola. We do have other people bring their own aircraft out to the course. With long lining, and it's a good question. It's one that we get asked quite often. Does that translate? So no matter whether you're flying a Black Hawk, an A-Star, a Chinook, or a 44, the long line is just hard to do. It's very difficult to fly. So it's not so much the aircraft as it is watching the intricacies of that line and getting some time, repetitive time on that line is what gets you used to it. So we've chosen the 44 because we worked out that it's 20 hours to get someone through a course, we think anyway, to get to a point where they could go to an operator, commercial operator, and safely fly a basic long line. Have the safe skill set to be able to fly one safely. So we use a 44. It's very affordable. It's a good platform to fly in. Very sensitive on the control, so it makes you even better long line pilot as far as working that hook and line. And you get 20 hours out of it as opposed to using maybe a larger company aircraft that you might only get 10 hours for the same price or 5 hours for that same price. You need that repetition.
So it's 20 hours in the air. How long is the initial course?
20 hours of flight time. We have 10 hours of ground, basic classroom ground. And that's Kim's course classes as well as the operational classes on that. There's a ground school class, a ground crewman class. So we have all pilots get on the ground and you get a really good perspective from the ground angle, looking up and having a hook coming at you and the speed and having, construction loads coming at you, that type of thing. So it's a very important part of it, which people, if people out there have the opportunity to go on a long line job, they should go on a long line job as ground crew and get that perspective. It's an incredible perspective and very helpful.
Now, are you using steel lines or are you using synthetic lines for your training?
Yeah, so we all started off Columbia years ago with steel lines. There's not so many steel lines out there anymore. The synthetic lines are pretty much standard now. They're very light, and it's all about pounds per hour and getting the max out of your lift. So those synthetic lines came up, they were very light, so the steel were kind of pushed off to the side. We do use a 200-foot steel line just for training at our company, Vola Mission, just because that, people get pretty comfortable with that synthetic line. You put that steel line on, and it really brings you back to basics again. You have to slow down even more than you would with a synthetic line, which just works on your skill set again. And so it's a pretty humbling one. So when people start getting really, really good at the synthetic line, they think they got it down, we'll put the steel line on and kind of bring them back to earth again a little bit. Go from there.
Where do you see areas where students might have, I won't say difficulties, but maybe challenges where they're used to, they might even be a high time pilot, say, several thousand hours, but all of a sudden they're flying differently. Where are some of the areas where they might take more time?
The vertical reference is the big one. That's one of the hardest things, and to consistently, especially after you've flown, 45 minute, 30, we kind of go up in increments, 20, 30, 45 increment flight time, hanging out the door, flying that line, and you have to come back and do a VR landing. It's very difficult. It's very hard for people to get used to. It's very hard for people to grasp. There's a lot of pilots we get out at our place that are very experienced, and it's very hard for them to all of a sudden not go to fly a helicopter again. To get in, we've not seen anyone that's come out of the course in 14 years that's got straight in an aircraft and done VR flying and nailed it from minute one. So that's pretty frustrating for people. Bit of a ego bummer as well, keeps you definitely keep some humility in there when you're flying the long line. So it's one of the major parts.
I'm looking at some of the photos. It looks like you fly a variety of different loads, but it looks like there's some pretty good dents inside of things. I assume that keeping it simple for the students makes their life a little bit easier.
It does. We start off with the very basics. Everything at some points gets punched off, including long lines, all that type of thing. So better that happens out on the training course. And we go through all that type of thing, all through hook checks and you call outs. You've got basic call outs that you need to do for everything you do so that you don't, make mistakes. And, we've learned from a lot of mistakes over a lot of years. I've certainly learned a lot. So, basics first, for sure.
Well, and then it looks like some of the advanced courses you get into things that are a little bit more difficult. So you might have two parts, or you might have some congested area training.
That's right. So we get into some complex loads, like a two-part load, for instance. A company, they hire you or your company for a reason. We can lift 3,000 pounds. Well, the company that hired you want you to be lifting 3,000 pounds. Maybe your loads are only 1,000 pounds. So you can actually rig two loads together and you can fly that and max out. And that might get you and your company the job again next time. So we teach people the intricacies of the two-part load, that if you do it right, it can be done in a very safe manner. Medical litters, just kind of going through in the case of an emergency. What do we do? You're out in the bush, and at Columbia, we always have a litter on all the vehicles and all fuel trucks and that type of thing. And logging especially, you've got to have that handy. And you never know when you're going to get called on to do something like that. So that's also part of the training.
Okay. Now, Andre, you said you obviously learned from the person who flew the 500 before you. So where is the value by taking a long line course over, say, on-the-job training? Or maybe Tim could answer that. I don't know, either one.
Andre can elaborate on this too, but I think what the most important thing is when you try to do anything learning on the job, it becomes more difficult. So especially, there's a couple of factors in play there. One, like Andre will tell you, it's the pilot that's training you is ready to move on and get promoted to the next, so they're rushing. Or it can be, chief pilot director of ops that doesn't really have the time to go through everything with you. They may not be an instructor or have instruction experience in the past, so that instruction level there, being able to communicate to the person that's learning is very important. And then the other thing is you're learning on the job. Learning on the job costs money. It's, trying to do work and some loads and that sort of stuff. It adds an increased pressure to do it and do it right. And so it's a pressure on the pilot that's learning and pressure on the pilot that's trying to teach someone. So with us, we've had owners that come out and train with us, and we've gone to their locations also. And the difference between when they come out to us is that they are fully immersed. They're not interrupted. They can go through step by step and are able to do everything and just focus solely on training. When we've gone to their places of operation, they're still trying to run their business. So it's good that they're getting that formal structure that we provide, but at the same time, still, when you can take someone and put them in the environment, the training environment, that's all that they're focused on. And it's just repetition and learning over and over again. So it solidifies those skills, and you're able to build on them each and every day. So.
Okay, so it sounds like some businesses either will send a person to a school like yours, or they'll do the OJT. Now, if you are a pilot who wants to enter the field but does not have a job that provides longline training, it seems almost like a catch-22. You can't get the job without the longline training or without the longline experience, but how do you get the longline experience without having a job that does it? So, you know, how does that balance out?
Yeah, it's definitely the big question everybody asks, you know. And in the past, there were a lot of jobs, like we all learned logging, right? So there's a lot of jobs back in the day that had repetition, that had there was constant longline work. That's not so much the case anymore. And so as an individual, we are getting a lot more companies that send people to us, and also companies that ask us if we've had any graduates that have gone through the course. So it's tough to get that longline time. So, you know, you can come out of this with 20 hours, or, you know, there's other courses out there, obviously, but at ours, it's 20 hours. You come out, you've got that on your resume. You've gone from the basics all the way through. There's a lot of tips and pointers that you don't get on the OJT. You know, that over years, decades of experience that we've worked out to where you don't need to go through the same pain that we went through on a lot of different things. And it's, you know, any training at all is better than just rolling up without anything. If you roll up with a resume and you've got 20 hours of training on a long line, we train from 200-foot lines down to 50-foot lines, and someone else rolls up with a resume with no long line time on at all. You know, most likely you get a good look anyway.
Well, actually, okay, you talked about the long line lengths, a 200-foot line versus a 50-foot line. Obviously, the military uses sling loads, which are significantly shorter lines. Can you talk about the difference? You know, is how the transition goes from somebody flying a sling load to somebody flying a long line?
Yeah, you bet. So we get a lot of veterans, a lot of military pilots that talk with us and come out and do the course. And so I'll say, oh, we've got plenty of sling loads, kind of like what Jim said earlier. You know, they've got a lot of sling loads, that type of thing. They are two different things, and it's a little difficult until you see it in action to kind of work out what those differences are. But you're talking a short line versus a long line. The military aircraft aren't really set up for a long line. They don't have bubble windows. Most of them have the doors on, that type of thing. And it's a matter of training and all that as well, you know, budget, I'm sure. But so the sling load is very short, can be, you know, 15 feet to 30 feet to in between there. And the long line, you're looking at 150, 200 feet. Afghanistan, in our Chinooks, we use 200 feet. And in 107s, we're using 150s. What that's done, what we found in the war zone, which there's never been any long lining prior to us getting there in 2011, is that it's opened up a lot more of the smaller bases, the small cops and outposts on hilltops where you couldn't get a large military aircraft in there with a short line, because the footprint that it leaves just damages and blows things around, and it's very difficult and makes it oftentimes not worth it. But we come in there with 150-foot, 200-foot long line, touch it down. It's a good example on the right there. It's a little tiny guys, SF guys made that up with wooden tarps, you know, and they're humping their fuel and stuff up the hill. We're able to bring a fuel blivet in there, set it, and go just kind of logging style. And they loved it. And what it's done is opened us up to a lot more areas over there that we could work, and certainly a lot of flying time for the aircraft. So, but go ahead.
I was going to say, I suppose it depends on the individual pilot, but how long does it take to develop a precision placement, you know, where you feel comfortable or confident setting something inside of one of these, you know, observation posts, as opposed to maybe a brute strength project like helicopter logging or even firefighting, where accuracy is not quite as paramount?
Sure. Yeah, it does depend on the pilot, you bet. And you know, 20 hours from us is not going to get you, you know, doing precision stuff out the gate, for sure. It's a good foundation. We do get you to a very high level, but you know, like for instance, in Afghanistan, a pilot they'll do a course, they'll go over there, they'll be on basic loads, you know, larger loads in a larger fob. Once they start getting used to that and start, you know, getting used to the aircraft itself and the different size hooks and lines and things like that, they'll then graduate after a certain amount of hours. And it's really based on their ability at that point. It's not so much the hours, because there are people who come in and they'll hit the hours right at the money and they'll be able to do precision lifts pretty quickly. But, you know, a couple hundred hours, 150 hours, something like that, you know, anywhere in there, once you're used to it. And,
are there people who just simply can't do long line operations?
You know, we've been doing this for 14 years. We've had, I don't know, maybe 2 people. And it was more, I think, you know, it's a lot to do with attitude and a lot to do with mental. Longline's a very mental game. But if you stick to the basics, you know, and just do it right and always default slow. In the event that things start going haywire on you, you back off and get a little slower. You'll usually find that it was due to going too fast. So it's pretty rare. I think, you know, we've heard people come to us and say, oh, they told me I'd never be able to do this. And that's not the case.
Okay, I think I would like to switch to Cody, but before we go, I see that we do have a mutual friend visiting the webinar today, Don Patterson, one of Columbia's longtime load managers, pilots, way back to when he was even driving fuel truck, has joined us online today. So I'd like to say hi to Don.
Hey, Don, and Don's the man that actually gave me my start in construction at Columbia Helicopters. Thank you, Don. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, I do appreciate it. I think that we'll have you close off your camera. I'm going to back up my slides and we'll bring up a picture of Cody so at least everybody knows who we're talking to while we're doing that. Cody, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we've got you loud and clear. Do appreciate your joining us. Hope you're doing well out on the floor. Where are you fighting fire today?
I'm calling in today from Fox Helibase. That's in Lancaster, California. It's kind of north of Los Angeles.
That sounds like a garden spot. You nice and comfortable today?
Yeah, it's balmy 111 degrees out here today.
Okay, Cody, how did you get involved in longline flying? What brought you to the field?
That's a good question, Dan. You know, I was always fascinated by large tandem rotor helicopters, and an operator purchases that helicopter to make money. And one of the primary things that you'll find in the heavy lift transport world, especially utility, is that the helicopters use what I would consider long lines to conduct missions, whether it be precision sets, logging, firefighting, you know, you name it. If it needs to be moved and it's heavy, they typically do with a long line. So my attraction was the aircraft. Fell in love with the aircraft, fell in love with the people and the mission. And as the proverbial saying goes, you know, the hook was set pretty deep.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, now, how long have you been with Columbia now?
I just started my 17th year with Columbia Helicopters. They've been a fantastic family-owned, until recently, company to work for. But most importantly, it's the culture and the people that have really given me the opportunity and the love for the industry.
Okay, well, now that you're chief pilot, that probably means you get involved in hiring practices. And so, what type of resumes are you seeing? What do you look for when you go through the stack of resumes? Are you looking for training? Are you looking for OJT? What kind of hours are you looking for? What brings somebody to the top of the resume stack?
That's a really good question. And, you know, there isn't really a demographic where a person accelerates in this type of work. I can't say that, you know, a person from a certain school or a person from a certain area or even a certain country is somebody that is cut out for this line of work. So there is a bit of a leap of faith. There is a great deal of contacting references, resume structure, can the individual communicate? You know, so that's kind of the high level thing that gets somebody through the door. We have basic qualifications, and there's definitely some red flags. You know, I tend to stray away from somebody that may have had 5 jobs in the last 2 years. You know, the commonality is usually the individual at that point.
Did we lose you?
I'm still here.
Oh, okay, sorry. Just the way you ended that one, I wasn't sure. So when you bring somebody in for an interview, what stands out for somebody that you think will be successful?
Somebody successful has an ability to communicate and largely attitude. I would say that one of the most important attributes to somebody that is successful in this line of work is their attitude. That's not something you can train. That's not something you can go to school for. But I think as the individual can be very cognizant of is their attitude. Second is work ethic. Again, it's kind of like the skill of leadership. You know, leaders are born and they rise through adversity. I think people with work ethic, you know, it's also situational as well. So somebody that can articulate that, you know, they have a can-do attitude, they're humble, and they understand that, you know, this line of business, if not, you know, laden with a lot of experiences, is going to be a humble and sometimes humiliating, as Andre could probably attest to, experience. So somebody needs to have a depth of character and be able to really start from scratch. Learning to fly a long line is really starting to learn to fly all over again. So in interview process, again, you know, we ask very specific questions, and of course I'll keep those to myself for now, but they need to be genuine answers, and it helps us kind of decipher whether or not we're going to take the time to invest in an individual.
Okay, so if somebody came in the door and had the right attitude, had the right responses to the questions, but did not have long-line experience, does Columbia use courses like vola mission, or do they stick with OJT, or is there a combination of both?
Back in the day, we used to be OJT, and as Andre articulated, you know, we would kind of grow new pilots up through our light ship program, where they would be trained in the 500 by typically the pilot on shift, and they would get some experiences the job allowed for, and that wasn't always the case. And you know, still trying to make $1 and train a pilot is a very difficult thing. Recently, we have started using a course Volo in Texas, and I can speak firsthand to the result of the pilot that I've seen come out of there. We do hire people with zero long line experience. And again, coming back to the attitude and work ethic, everybody at my organization starts out as an SIC, and they get the opportunity to build a relationship and see, you know, what we're about, and we can see what they're about as well. So at that point, we decide to invest the money in the individual, and we'll send them to this course. On the backside of the course, you know, I see a pilot that has a basic understanding of long line flight. They have those foundational skills that we can build on with our type of aircraft. And one of the things that I appreciate with Volo is instead of using something sophisticated, turbine powered, or potentially a dual complex hydraulic system, is, you know, very simple R44 that affords us the opportunity to get, you know, 20 hours of training on them. I never received 20 hours of training in a company helicopter. You know, we were looking at expenses. And so when you try to train on the job, you know, there's other factors that do play into it. And, you know, the old saying that time is money is heavily weighed in there as well. So where a person can go to a course and focus on their training, adapting to this type of vertical reference flying, and hone those skills and not be pressured by, you know, the time of day, we've got other things to do, or maybe the situation just does not allow for the type of training. There's plenty of that later on, you know, when you get integrated with the aircraft. As Andre said, you know, we start out with basic loads, and if those loads aren't available, of course, the OJT is going to be dictated by, you know, the daily missions.
Well, speaking of missions, what kind of longline operations does Columbia conduct right now? Helicopter logging doesn't seem to be as significant as it used to be, but you guys obviously still are one of the companies that excels with longline operations.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. You know, longline has always been Columbia's bread and butter, and you know, we fortunately have some, in my opinion, the best longline aviators in the world. We primarily are in the forest preservation, wildlife conservation. So that could be firefighting. It could be stream enhancement, which is kind of a backwards logging, if you will. We're taking process logs and putting them in streams for the buildup of habit habitation for fish and their enhancement there. So that keeps us pretty busy through the summer months. Construction as necessary, that kind of comes in waves, different projects and different things. What makes us unique is the ability to lift the size of loads, and with this type of aircraft. So it's a pretty niche market. There's definitely other operators that can operate cheaper with smaller aircraft and that kind of thing, and that just kind of comes up to the company. 9 years ago, we got involved with government services and built a name in that sector as well. And it was a bit of a change for us, switching from primarily being an external load only company to both a internal and passenger hauling arena. And we had the fortunate opportunity to demonstrate those skills and abilities, as Andre articulated, in regards to long line precision placement. And that was the term that they coined for us was L2P2.
Oh, very cool, L2P2. You mentioned capacities, lifting. What can your aircraft lift?
The Model 234 has a little bit higher gross weight limitation than the CH-47. Those are becoming a little more popular. A few more operators have them now. So I would say, in a practical sense, 26,000 pounds is about the maximum that helicopter can lift. And it does very good with the weights. We also have the CH-47s, which is a little bit less. Of course, 25,000 pounds would be the maximum there. We also operate and are the only operators of the BV-107. And that hook capacity is just under 10,000 pounds. So it does provide for a variance of different load capacities. If somebody has something lighter, we can offer them a cheaper platform.
That's still a pretty significant chunk of weights. What have been some of your favorite jobs you've worked on over the years?
That's a good question. It's very gratifying to come out to these communities and be able to preserve homes. Just a couple of days ago, the fire lines were racing towards kind of an outset community. So for me, it's very gratifying being able to assist the firefighters on the ground and give them some support that they need. They're the ones that are working really hard, and anything we can do to help support the fire line is definitely very gratifying. Flying soldiers, from a remote fob to the base where they're going home so they can rotate out. That's an immense feeling, especially for a civilian, to be able to support the U.S. forces overseas. And it's a bit of a lifestyle that a lot of civilians don't get to see, and a more deepened appreciation for what they do for us overseas. There's definitely been good days and bad days, and I would say to somebody that's wanting to get into the external heavy lift industry is, you're going to have to accept that some days are going to be better than others and worse than others. And I can tell you some of my favorite flights. The day the mission was probably average, but the people working with or the job completion was very gratifying.
Oh, very cool. Okay, Cody, well, I'm going to take your picture off screen for just a little while. We'd like to have you come back for our Q&A, but now I would like to invite Sammy to bring up her camera. We'll talk with her for a little while.
Hello.
Hey, Sammy, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Now, you are working for Helicopter Express as a firefighting pilot. Where are you located right now?
Right now, I am in Madras, Oregon. I'm working with the Warm Springs Indian Reservation.
And what kind of aircraft are you flying?
The A-Star AS-350 B3.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Well, how did you get involved in, first of all, I guess, helicopters and long lines? It's not necessarily a traditional career path for a woman.
Yeah, so we just got to meet today, which was great, and we kind of found out that our paths, I would say, intertwined a little bit. But I'm from a small town in Northern California. It's called Paradise, and there is what we call the mini Grand Canyon out there. And unfortunately, people used to use that part of the area to drive off and commit suicide. So kind of a sad story, but there would also be life flight helicopters and other helicopters out there helping the mission, trying to maybe get the person to medical help. And finally, they decided to close down that area and take all the cars out. And so I was actually driving to work one day and saw a Chinook helicopter, which happened to be you, which was great, and thought that was a really cool job. So I used to see that all the time, and Actually, there's a local utility company as well, which I would see do power line work, and thought that was a very cool job. So just started to get into it that way, and just started with Helicopter Express this year. It's my first year in firefighting. So getting to learn the long line is challenging and a lot of fun.
Well, what kind of a career path have you had so far that led you up to this?
So far, I did kind of the normal path of flight instructing. I'm actually close to my hometown of flight instructing in Bend, Oregon, so not too far away, and got to instruct there for a year and a half, and then was offered a job with Papillon Helicopters in the west rim of the canyon, so close to Boulder City, Nevada, and did a lot of tours out of there. Was able to get experience in both the EC-130 and the AS-350, and that's where I've gotten my A-star time. And from there, as you mentioned earlier, I was able to be awarded a scholarship through the Whirly Girls. It was also in connection with Erickson and Vola mission, and was able to receive that 20 hours of longline training, which really helped and benefited me getting into the fire industry.
So what, when you were going through the course, what, were there any hiccups, challenges? How did it go for you?
Oh, absolutely. There was a lot of challenges. I actually was able to do the course with a gentleman who I was working with at Papillon, and we both would comment to each other about how hard it really is. You would think that flying a helicopter, no big deal, you add on a long line, and now you're learning to fly the helicopter all over again. So it is a bit of a challenge. I also found out that throughout those 20 hours, just about halfway through, at about 10 hours, I definitely felt like I was still struggling. So it's, I thought, very beneficial to get the full 20 hours. Even though 20 hours doesn't seem like that much, it's a very good foundation for getting yourself into long lining.
Do you think that the training and the long line experience is what helped get you to the A-star where you're flying today with Helicopter Express?
I do. They knew that I was going to this course, and they were very happy with that. They had had, I think, 2 or 3 pilots beforehand went to the course and found that the training given at Vola mission was a very good stepping stone, and they only had to tidy up a couple of things, but definitely felt that the skills were there. And my chief pilot actually did say that he recognized the skills, so he was very happy with the training that I received.
Oh, that's good to hear. So now, are you flying any long lines on the fires this summer? Are you carrying supplies? Are you bucketing water or anything like that?
We've done a little bit of everything so far. Mostly we do long line with a Bambi bucket, and I usually do a 100-foot long line. That seems to be the standard for right now, but we can do 50-foot. We can also do belly hooking, which is basically just putting the Bambi bucket straight to the bottom of the helicopter, and some cargo supplies. So I've done a little bit of everything.
Well, now that you've flown long lines for a little while, do you see yourself flying the helicopter without a bucket or without a line any differently? Does it change how you operate the aircraft?
I kind of go back to the basics of just try to be slow and smooth. And I think it has changed a little bit of my flying. When you're doing tours, per se, like in the Grand Canyon, you tend to get to doing the same thing. And so it becomes a little bit more normal. But flying the long line, with or without the line, really, every day is a different story. So just trying to go back to the basics of being very slow and controlled will help you. So it has changed my flying a little bit.
Would you recommend training to somebody, or would you recommend OJT, or what do you think is a good pathway for somebody who wants to follow in your career path?
I definitely think that doing some sort of training helps out a lot. Even though getting into the job with only 20 hours, I still have done a lot of on-the-job training, and every day is a new experience. But even having just a small little foundation for long lining has helped tremendously. I definitely recommend it to people. And I know sometimes it happens to, being a pilot is not cheap. We all understand that. So finding the funding for that could be a little bit tough, but I definitely recommend it to people. I think it takes a little bit of stress off yourself when you can just go back to the solid foundation of what you've been taught.
Okay, I do appreciate it. I'd like to go ahead and ask Andre and Kim to bring their camera back up, and I'm going to bring Cody's slide back up so we can have him participate with us as well. But I'd like to try and get into some of the questions. I was getting questions via email even as early as last night from somebody, Alessandro in Brazil. There's interest around the world on Longline operations. So we'll start with one of Alessandro's questions. I will leave these questions open unless they're specific for somebody. The first one was, if a pilot has experience in a particular model, let's say a Bell 412, will he or she have difficulty conducting longline operations, for instance, in say an AW139?
I'll go for that.
Okay, Andre, I think you were muted, so go ahead, Sammy, why don't you start?
I went from training with vola mission in the Robinson R44 to going back into the AS350 A-Star. And I would say, maybe my first hour, I felt a little uncomfortable, but it really goes back to those basic skills of flying the line. And so I think it transfers.
Okay, Andre, Kim, do we have you back via audio now?
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay,
I agree with Sammy there, Dan. It does transfer. It's like we train the Columbia guys. They get in the guys and girls. They get in 44, do the course, go over there, jump in a 107. We have a program set up there to where, like Sammy said, that first hour, you got to now get used to a different sight picture. You got to now get used to maybe a different hook, line length, or weight. So there are a few things, you're going to jump in there, and like Sammy said again, and Cody, you got to stick to the basics. Default should be slow and smooth. So as long as you do that and you get in and you treat it that way, and it'll transfer to all aircraft. There's a lot of different opinions on that, but I think that's
okay. We have a question from Michael Corvus. What, in your opinion, is the benefit of vertical reference compared to watching the area through the mirrors or cameras? How many cycles and rotations do students get within the 20 hours?
With mirrors and all, it's different sitting upright in the A-Star, looking through the vertical reference floor and using the mirrors for sure. So it kind of depends on what aircraft you're going to fly. But we're normally, within an hour, you'd probably fly 7 to 10 loads, setting them, releasing them, coming back around, picking them up again. So there's a lot of repetition. We go through just repetition and then, increase the level of difficulty as we go. But, and we fly left seat, right seat, depending on what aircraft. Someone will come to us and say, hey, like Sammy, hopefully I'll be in an A-Star fighting fire or doing work. And so we'll go to the right seat or left seat if we're training the Columbia people. So it just kind of depends on what aircraft and what you're doing.
Okay, I'm going to jump back for a personal question. I know I asked Cody this a second ago. We'll start with Sammy. Sammy, have there been any particularly memorable longline loads you carried? And then I'd like Andre or Kim to answer the same thing.
Well, I would say at the course, Andre knew that I was going to go into firefighting, and so we did bring out the Bambi bucket, and I think they said this was their first time, but we kind of set a little bonfire up and was able to put out fire. So that was the most fun and just kind of rewarding cherry on top of the training that I got there. So I definitely think that was a lot of fun.
Okay, Andre, what's memorable for you?
I think lifting howitzers in Afghanistan's pretty cool. And then quite a few of the construction jobs that I did with Don there over the years, pulling boats off beaches and all sorts of different things. Precision set kind of stuff is really gratifying. It's pretty nerve-wracking at times, and you're pretty tense for sure, but things like that.
Okay. Cody, I've got a question specifically for you. As a pilot, do you think that the personnel who prepare the material for the sling operations should be training not only on the job, but also receive prior instruction? So how does Columbia handle your load coordinators?
Absolutely, that's a very good question. And you know, a long line mission or session is very much part of a team. So it takes just as much dexterity from the folks on the ground at times as it does as the people in the cockpit. So I would say that OJT training with load managers is essential.
Okay. Andre or Sammy, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Go ahead,
I
Sam.
found doing the ground training was a lot of fun and just eye-opening situational awareness to what's going on above you. So I thought it was a lot of help.
Yeah, I agree with that, Dan. It's a part of the program you really need to be involved with. You know, you can see whether, you know, from the ground, you get to look up at the helicopter, see if the line's like this before they pick up, and you know it's going to shoot left, and all these tiny little things that you're going to see from the ground that you don't see up there because you're so target fixated up there, you're so tense. You know, when you're training, you're sweating, it's just complete overload. So to be on the ground and see that perspective, it's invaluable. And like I said, I highly recommend it for sure. We get everybody on the course has to do that.
Does Vola Mission offer courses for the ground coordinators?
Yep, we do. So a few companies will bring out their own people with them. The pilots will come out, they'll bring out a couple of their ground crew. They might be mechanics or crew chiefs or ground handlers. And together they work the course, and then by the time they leave, they're highly tuned. So it's pretty cool to watch.
Let's see. Another one from Michael Corvus. Are there any remarkable experiences or tips for flying long lines at night, especially with NVGs? Is that even something that is done?
Cody question there.
I have attempted flying a long line at night. I would say that yes, it can be done. It takes a person that has, I would say, a significant amount of long line time, and the field of view and the advancement of night vision goggle technology recently, I would say, afford that opportunity. The technology out there is, 20/20 visual acuity. So it's been my experience that it can be done. As far as a practical application, there's certain industries that I just don't see it taking off. But no pun intended, my eyes are open and look forward to getting to develop that opportunity.
Oh, nicely put. Thank you. Question from Martin Schubert. I take it Martin might be in Canada. For Vola, do you take your courses on the road? Maybe to Canada, it says.
Yes, we absolutely do. We've gone out to Illinois, some other places. We're planning on going to Florida next month and Arizona scheduled also. So yes.
Well,
Yeah.
based on what Jim Viola was saying at the start of the webinar, perhaps Washington, D.C. might be an area that you want to consider as well.
There you
go. Let's see, from Felipe. Our Army started fighting wildfires in support of civil authorities 2 years ago. We've been flying with an AS-350B3 and an AS-532 Super Puma. We normally connect the bucket directly to the cargo hook of the B3. What is the decision criteria for you to use the A-Star with a long line?
The criteria for it, we have just the onboard cargo hook, so it can hold a little over 3,000 pounds on the hook itself, and it seems to work pretty well.
Well, I think what he's wondering is maybe it would depend on where you're dipping water. If you're working from areas around Paradise, California, where you have tree-lined streams, you may not have access to a belly hook. But if you are working around stock ponds in Loyalton or something like that, maybe you could use a belly hook. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it's true. We use anywhere from the 150-foot line to the belly hook. So depending on where you can find your water source is what you would use. Even yesterday, I was dipping out of a pond that was covered by probably around 150-foot trees, but it was pretty wide open, so you have a good chance in there. You're not trying to get yourself into a situation where you can't get out of. So you really got to judge the spot that you're at and give yourself an out. Don't ever get yourself into a situation where you can't release the water, the load, or climb out of it.
Okay. Cody, let's throw this one to you. Do you think somebody with a helicopter air ambulance background could get into longlining, or would it be too much of a change in the flight style?
I think anybody can get into the longline type of work. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about the person's attitude and their work ethic. If you have a strong desire to do this well and a keen sense of fine motor skills, anybody can do this type of work with that level of dedication. The people that I work, they come from varying backgrounds and varying different skill sets and varying experience levels. The one thing that they do have in common is their attitude and their work ethic. And I would say that would set the person apart. If somebody doesn't want to be challenged, if somebody doesn't want to work on the corners of the map during the heat of the day in mountainous conditions and varying terrain and at max gross weight, this is probably not the sector for you.
Okay. Do you want to continue on that, Andre?
Oh no, Cody nailed it right there. Most of the time, if they can't get a conventional crane into somewhere, they're going to call a helicopter most of the time. And so usually that's an austere environment somewhere. Usually the wind's howling. The living conditions probably aren't that flash. You're either freezing in freezing in Alaska or hot in Afghanistan or so. So again, it's about work ethic. It's about, everyone's out there together. So, you're all facing the same conditions and dealing with the same things. So, you've got to want to do it hard. You got to get out there, like we say, with the ground crew. You got to get out with mechanics. It's one team out there living out in the bush a lot of the time. So, you really need to want to get into this. You got to be passionate about getting into longlining, I think. It's not something you're just going to give it a try to just in the hope you're like it.
We've had several EMS pilots come to us. We have a lot of pilots that are wanting a change in career path. So, we've had all kinds of backgrounds, but several EMS pilots that have transferred into longlining. So.
Well, and actually, Kim, Andre's description of some of the flying conditions bring us up questions about human factors. What do you talk about when you're teaching the ground school portion or the flying portion about mindset and human factors?
Yeah, we look a little bit about that. One of the classes that I do teach is getting them to understand a little bit what's going on with their brain when they're learning something new. As Sammy will attest, the first couple of days are extremely frustrating. And pilots that tend to have lots of hours, it's even more frustrating. They can't figure out what's going on, why they just can't pick it up instantaneously. So we discuss a bit about that. We also discuss, that, like Sammy said, you have 20 hours and it's a very good, solid foundation, but the important thing to get across to the pilots as they walk out the door is you have 20 hours, you've had lots of different experiences here at Vola Mission doing different loads, but just remember you're going now out to different environments. Luckily in Texas, they get to experience some of those austere situations as far as the humidity and heat, freezing cold, doors off, that sort of stuff. But we do discuss that. It's a whole different demand on them. So it's important that they understand that. So yeah, we cover some of that.
Okay, awesome. Have a question. Let's see. Says this is from John Chin. The majority of vertical reference pilots that I see are older and close to retirement. Do you think that the industry of vertical reference and precision vertical reference will be able to support all the retirements in the next 5 to 10 years?
If I may, that's
Go ahead, Cody. Sorry.
That's definitely a valid question. There are folks that, as Andre indicated earlier, that got their start in helicopter logging, and I can't think of an arena that has a pilot conducting more approaches, working at max gross weight, efficiently using the helicopter in any sort of way or any other experience that I've had. With that industry, really diminishing, it is difficult to train up the next group of people. And I would say that a Longline academy like Volo is even more essential, because a lot of the people that really pioneered the industry are retiring and moving on. So it definitely is a challenge. And when we're talking about on-the-job training, the jobs are getting more and more finite, so it's less and less available for us to do on-the-job training.
Tammy, did you see yourself as part of the next generation? Are you encouraging other people to join you in this field?
I absolutely do. I think with some sort of scholarship, if they could, or funding, you can definitely make it work. And if you are adamant about doing a utility or long line job, you will get there. And also, like Cody was saying, with the right attitude and the willingness to learn, I think a lot of companies are starting to accept the fact that they either need to train their pilots or send them to a course to get the training.
Okay, we have another question from Michael Corvus, a couple of them actually. What are your thoughts on using autopilots or hover modes in long line operations, especially in respect to create swinging loads? Maybe to reduce swinging loads? I don't know that swinging loads is exactly what you want to do.
Yeah,
I don't know that an autopilot would be the right tool for this. The thing is, and as Andre said, when they call in a helicopter, it's usually in an austere environment, and it's probably a windy environment, and the constant amount of correction that's required usually is not afforded by an autopilot. Now, having said that, I fly utility helicopters that do have autopilots, but their ability to hold a hover, it's just not there. You're working closely with ground crews, and they need things, and you can kind of look forward 2 and 3 steps ahead. I don't think any sort of automation would allow the pilot to be effective in that arena, but that's just my opinion.
I think this one we may have to direct them to the FARs for 135 and Part 137, but are there minimum requirements for human or helicopter external sling load operations or human external cargo in the US? I mean, starting with 135, 137, is that a reasonable place for somebody to start for learning on those?
I do believe Part 133 would be the regulation that he's looking for there for human external cargo. But yes, the regulations, they're very clear on what's required.
Okay, well, I think we're going to just about running out of time. So let's go back to each one of you, Andre, Kim, Sammy, and Cody. What's the single most important message you'd like to convey to the audience today? Andre, let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah, that it is achievable. Just go get after it. If you want to get in the long line industry, go for it. Don't listen to everybody. Everyone's an expert in this field. We all know. Just run with your passion and go after it, and it is doable for sure. That's what we've all done. Everyone on this webinar has done that exact thing.
Okay, Kim.
I would say the biggest question that we tend to get again is what you brought up earlier. How do you get in if you don't have the experience, and how do you get the experience if you can't get in? I would say just like a progression as you do with your flight training, and then you tend to go into instruction and then tours, there is a bit of a path there. And it's similar to that with long lining. You can get into more of an entry level sort of thing, Christmas tree, firefighting, that sort of stuff, and then work your way up depending on what you want to do, construction, ultimately power line, HEC, that sort of stuff. So I would say do your research, know what company you want to work for, whether they offer training, whether they don't, and just really speak with the chief pilots, the director of ops of those companies, and not necessarily listening to all the talk that's out there, but do your own research and go talk to people as far as the companies you want to work with and find your path, and you'll get there.
So networking helps the project. So let's go ahead and transfer on to the chief pilot. Cody, what would you like to pass along as a parting wisdom?
You know, I really liked the career choice that I took, and I was very fortunate along the way, and I don't regret it. So somebody's on the fence whether or not they want to dabble in it. You know, it's hard to know what you're missing, and maybe it's not for you. This line of work definitely isn't for everybody, but I can tell you I've been to some amazing places that I don't think I would have gone otherwise. I've met even more amazing people and got to fly some pretty cool hardware. So it's definitely a rewarding career. It's challenging. I think the ups are as frequent as the downs, but for the right person, I think it's a really good career opportunity. And I would just encourage, you know, the next generation. You know, there are opportunities there. If you have the desire, you will find the way. You're going to be told no a lot. You might be told next year, you might be given a variation of discouraging news. But if you really want it, there will be a way presented for you.
Okay, Sammy, it looks like your camera might have frozen up on you, but you know, I think we all have the experience of motel internet. But let's finish up with you. What last bit of wisdom would you like to share with the audience?
Kind of adding on to what Cody said is just to, you know, if there's a will, there's a way. So no matter what, if this is something that you're interested in doing, find the path to do it. Network a lot, ask a lot of questions to whoever you can find, and be open and always wanting to learn. I feel like every single day is a different day to learn something new, and try not to be narrow-minded about that. Always try to learn and enjoy what you're doing.
Okay, well, Andre, Kim, Sammy, and Cody, thank you so much for sharing your time today. You know, we always appreciate the people join us to give back to the industry. And I think your information today has been really, really helpful. We're getting a lot of really positive comments from Felipe, from Vidal, from Michael. Everybody is really expressing a great deal of appreciation for the assistance you provide today. Obviously, we wish you well, fly safe, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
I'm just going to wrap up here in just a second with a little bit of last minute housekeeping as soon as I can bring up the correct slide. Here we go. Follow-up questionnaire will be coming shortly. Obviously, we used the questionnaire, the answers, your responses to our questionnaire to provide today's webinar on Longline operations. So please, when you see the questionnaire, take a few minutes, let us know how we did. Let us know what you'd like to see us talk about in the future. The next week's webinar, we're not 100% certain on the exact title yet, but it will be on mentoring for safe operators, or operators and mentoring for safety, something like that. We have a great panel from Airbus, from Robinson Helicopter Company, and from Becker Helicopters in Australia. Watch for the link that will be coming in email. It should be coming through social media, and of course it'll be in Rotor Daily as well. Finally, as always, we ask that you let us know how HAI is doing. We represent the entire helicopter industry globally. We want to know if you have pain points. We want to know if you need assistance. We want to know what we're doing right. We want to know how things are looking for you. Best way to do that is to send an email to James Viola at president@rotor.org. He does see every one of the emails, and then he does pass the emails along to the staff where it's appropriate. So please use that avenue to let us know what we're doing. As always, we invite you to be safe, fly safe, and we will see you next week on HAI at Work. Thank you.